Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sisters in Crime Atlanta's chapter, the Off the Shelf program that which we started in order to bring readers and writers together. And today we have a very special guest. We are talking with Joyce Woollcott. Joyce writes as J. Woollcott, and she is a Canadian author. Hang on, guys. I'm sorry. Let me let Sharon in. That's another thing. If you guys can, if somebody wants to come in, if you have access to letting them in, I'd appreciate it. But Joyce is a Canadian author born in Belfast, Northern Ireland,
yeah.
or from Northern Ireland.
Yeah, in Belfast.
And she has a recent release, A Nice Place to Die. And we are very excited to chat with her today and hear all about her book and her journey to publishing. And so we are going to kick it off by asking Joyce our standard question that we ask all of our authors, which is for her to give us her backstory. We would like to know about you, Joyce, aside from what we can read on your bio, on the back of your book. So tell us something about you that we are not going to learn by reading that.
Okay, well, I guess I may touch on a couple of different ones, but I came over here. I was born in Northern Ireland, and I went to art college, and I was a designer for a year or so, and then I emigrated to Canada, and I worked in broadcasting and television for many years as a designer, director of design. So it was very interesting, an interesting career, stressful, but after a while, I mean, then I decided to take early retirement. My mom passed away, and at that point I thought, well, we can, financially we can afford it, so we might as well do the things, because life is pretty short. I think we all agree on that. So I thought, well, I wouldn't mind writing, and I like painting, so I thought, well, let's go with that, So I started a little bit of a book. I wrote a book which I had thought about when I was still working, and it was I don't even know where it came from. It was called Abducted. And I wrote that my first summer when I was off work, when I finished work. And I joined Sisters in Crime. No, that's not true. I joined Crime Writers of Canada. And primarily, to be honest, because they have a mentoring program. And I thought, well, I need that. Because you have to understand, and I'm sure we're all in the same boat, that when we write, I had no idea what I was doing. And maybe you guys had a bit more when you started, but remember, I wasn't in a program or anything like that, And that's what kind of not annoys me, but sometimes you see these new debut authors, bless them, they've done these great creative writing courses in university, and out they come all shiny, and they write a debut novel, and they get a great editor, and bang, they're a big success. And I go, it's not fair. But anyway, I wasn't that person. So I really wanted a mentor, because when you first start writing, you want to know if you're okay. Like, you want to know if you're being ridiculous, or if you got a voice. So I asked if I joined, and then eventually I asked about the mentor, and they said, oh, we stopped that program. I went, what? Oh no. Because really a lot of those associations, when I started that, they didn't have much for debut authors or authors who were trying to write, who weren't published, unpublished, really didn't have anything except their unpublished awards, which they called the unhanged authors then. And that was the only thing an unpublished person could do. And don't forget, I was only writing because I loved mysteries, and I was writing something similar to what I was reading. I didn't have any idea about formatting and typography or anything. So I had this manuscript that was pretty much finished, and I finally got a mentor. They took pity on me and I said, okay, this writer will look up, she'll mentor you. And she really was fantastic. She helped me. She printed it out. She suggested some changes. And then she said, well, you should enter that in the unpublished awards for Crime Writers of Canada. I went, daft, you know. But I did, and I was longlisted, and nobody was more surprised than me. And honest to God, like, I was totally gobsmacked. But that one thing, that being longlisted in a national awards thing, it was life-changing in a sense, because it's gratification. It's somebody that you don't know, not your husband, not your best friend, not your daughter, read this and said, well, it's not too bad, you know, it's okay, like, it's not bad. Now, I didn't get shortlisted or anything, but I was really energized then. And I think if there's anything I can say to anybody, I mean, I'm not sure, probably a lot of you are published already. If someone isn't, one of the things I would say is enter as many contests for unpublished writers as you can, because the feedback you get is phenomenal. A lot of them, the Daphnes, I know that Liz here, she entered the Daphnes before she was published, and she came in second. Like, you know, she published the one. You know, it just depends on the year. You know, you can be lucky or unlucky, but all of those awards, and I think the Claymore, is that Nashville? Killer Nashville is for unpublished. I'm not sure.
I'm unfortunately, I'm not either. I've heard of the Claymore, but I don't know. Yeah.
Well, the only thing is you really,
It is
Yeah,
Killer Nash.
Claymore's Killer.
Yeah. The only thing is I would suggest is of course, if you're not Canadian, it doesn't work. If you're Canadian, the Crime Writers of Canada Unhanged, or the unpublished, and the Daphnes, because both of those, to my knowledge, and there may be others, you really only can be unpublished to enter those. Whereas I think the Killer Nashville one, the Claymore, you can have other books published, but if your book that you're entering hasn't been published, or you don't have an agent, you can enter it. So what you're doing is you're an unpublished author going up against authors who are already have published another book. But if you don't have a contract for the book you enter, then you can enter it. And I kind of find that that's a little bit awkward, a little bit harder to get through, you know. But anyway, and then I took a course in formatting, you know, how to Times New Roman. Hey, didn't know that. And borders and just things like that. They were all really, really helpful. And then you start that process, you know. Gosh, that's a long answer.
Well, no, but it was full of a lot of interesting information. And I will say this, and just to clarify, I am a reader, not a writer. And maybe someday I'll be a writer, but it had never occurred to me to seek an education or preliminary understanding of things like that, like formatting and typesetting and font. And so that I find very interesting, that you were intuitive enough to seek that out. Now, is that because you did join an organization in Canada that guided you, or was that you just yourself thinking, I need to know more?
Yeah, so I think if you seriously start this process of wanting to write, and a lot of people started when they're a little older, like, you know, I think there's almost like there's two, maybe three, but two lots. There are those young people now who are fortunate. And when I was younger, I mean, if I had said to my family, I'm going to go to university and be a writer, they would have just fallen off their chairs laughing. You've got to be joking. Because it wasn't an accepted thing, you know, like,
oh, yeah, they want to know, well, how are you going to pay the bills if your writer's not making any money?
Even studying art and design was like, my dad's going, well, you know, of course you can do it, love, you know, but you'll probably end up doing something else, you know. But being a writer, I never even considered it, even though I loved writing at school and stuff, but I just never considered it. So when I had at last the time that I could take to it, And I just started writing this book, and I became really frustrated because there were a lot of things that I didn't know. I didn't know, well, actually that very first class that I took on formatting and basic book writing, I guess I would say novel writing, I think it was at Ryerson. It was a fantastic, simple course. No bells and whistles. The teacher, whose name has escaped me right now, but she's actually a really great writer herself, more of a literary writer, but she's fantastic. She just said, well, here's what you have to do. And even if you want, and this is helpful even to query and to agents and things like that. If you want to look professional, you have to learn what to do, and you have to learn the typeface that you should be presenting your manuscript in. You have to know what size it should be, how to put the columns, all of those things. And she also started talking about things like, oh my God, point of view, and who are you when you write? Like, is it going to be omnipotent? Are you going to write in first person? I still don't really know all the details of this, but because in general terms, when I started to write, I just wrote what I was reading. I wrote in a way that the kind of books I read. So, if it was third person, which is, he walked into the room and sat down, what are you doing in there? She said, that kind of thing. Whereas you can also go, I walked into the room and sat down and I heard her yelling, what are you doing in there? So, that two thing where you're either in or looking at it. I didn't know any of that. And there's a certain, also with querying and trying to get your work out there when you have done it as best you can, there's a certain etiquette to your query letter, a certain etiquette to the, you really have to go into agents by finding out which agent wants your kind of book. So if you're writing a cozy, you're writing a romance, you have to find an agent that is specifically targeted to that genre, and you focus on those. Because if you just send out a wide catch-all query to all kinds of agents, all you're gonna end up with is heartache, because you're gonna have heartache anyway, because there are a lot of agents aren't even going to reply. But if you do want to get a reply, you at least need to target your writing and your queries to the right people. That's really important, I think, anyway. Mm-hmm. And also with regards to writing getting a manuscript out there, and I think we briefly talked about this earlier. You have a manuscript. I actually contacted, once I joined Sisters in Crime, it was an entirely new universe. I mean, there's no question that I wouldn't be, and I'm sure a lot of us, here would never be published, or would take a lot longer to be published if it wasn't for Sisters in Crime. Because then I realized there were all these wonderful classes and other people that you could talk to and engage with, who gave you so much interesting information and such valuable information. And also with today's world, Amazon puts somewhere in the region of 3 to 5 million books up every year. Now that's including traditionally published and self-published, and all the different sizes of publishers, but also self-published books. Now that there's no reason why you can't self-publish your book, but for me, if you self-publish it, don't do it because you've tried a whole bunch of agents or publishers and they've said no. That's not a good reason. The good reason to self-publish is if you're very confident in your book, you've done every single thing, you've had it edited professionally, and you want the freedom to decide where and when you promote it and how it looks. If you are just frustrated because nobody gets it, nobody understands how wonderful it is, and all of these agents who have read it have told you these things and you don't believe them, that's not a good idea, because it's just not quite ready. It doesn't mean it's not a good book. It just means that you you need to think a little bit more about it, and then it will be ready. And my personal thing is, get it edited, get a really good developmental editor if you can afford it. Well, what I was going to say was, I contacted, because of Sisters in Crime, Hank Philippi Ryan, who is in Sisters in Crime. She's amazing. And she did a talk and a conversation. And she said, if you didn't get a chance to talk to me, just email me and ask me your question and I will answer it. So I emailed her because I didn't get a chance. And I said, my question is this: if you have a little bit of extra money, not a lot, should you spend that money? My hair is weird. Should you spend your money on an editor, or should you go and network at a convention? You know, use part of it and start thinking about networking and getting your work out there. And she said, get an editor. And if you can afford it, go to a cheap convention. You know, like go to a small one, Malice, or, you know, what is it, West Coast Crime or East Coast Crime. So just go to a small convention just to get your feet wet, but get an editor. And she recommended an editor, but unfortunately he was a little bit out of my lane, a little bit expensive, $5,000. So I thought at this point, no, I don't think I'm quite ready for that kind of prime time, but I thanked her, and I did end up using an editor that she had recommended to someone else. But I actually, for the other thing is, yes, get an editor, but you also need to get that manuscript into the hands of other writers and readers, not your family. Okay, that's great and everything, but you need to walk away from that because they're going to love it. You know that. You need to get it into the hands of fellow writers and authors who are going to tell you the truth. They're not going to sugarcoat it, and they also, it's so much better if you can get it in the hands of people who write the same genre as you, because you can give it to, my book is not it's not gory or anything like that, but it's not a cozy either. Obviously it's police procedural, so it does have murder in it, but it's not really gory, and you don't see a lot of blood and guts or anything. And there's no real sex scenes, with a little bit of romance, a little bit of mention of sex and stuff. No, I actually don't think I actually say sex. You know what I mean? Like there's sex a bit in it, but it's not like naughty or anything like that. But you really have to, you need to get people who read and appreciate that kind of thing. And there are a lot of editors, for example, they'll read anything, but it's good to get an editor in the genre that you're focusing on. And I went through a bunch of editors actually, and I don't know what the best thing to do is, to get it to beta readers that are people and critique partners first, and then send it to an editor. That might be the best thing. But through I did a couple of manuscript exchanges, and that is, you send it in and the moderator chooses someone from your genre, and you do this back and forth. And not only do you get a really good idea of what the other person thinks, but you get an idea of what they're like too, you know? So you get, this is a debut author there. This is an unpublished writer who's just starting out in the genre that I'm in, and here's what their manuscript is like. So you can look through that and you can say to them, I'm not an expert, but just as a reader, this is what I think. And they do the same thing, hopefully, for you. And once you do that exchange, you can do it with someone online, like, you know, I did with Sisters in Crime. And then you can join local chapters of your Sisters in Crime or Crime Writers of Canada, I'm talking about, and wherever you are, readers groups, other writers groups in your neighborhood, your local library might have them. And just start, don't be afraid. It's very embarrassing when you first start out to read your work, because I don't know about anybody else, but I go, oh, this is rubbish, and they're going to laugh, you know. But you have to get it out there. You have to be that person, you know, put your big girl, what is it? Your big girl shoes.
Big girl panties on.
That's right. I don't want to say it. See, my book's not really. But you have to do that. You have to actually talk and actually quote from your book, and stand there and wait for it, you know. And nobody's going to burst out laughing, hopefully, unless it's a comedy. But you do have to take the good with the bad. And actually, I found the Daphnes, and I think Liz will agree with me. Once you get into their final, you get a lot of really good feedback. And the same with the crime, and I'm sure there are a lot of them in the US as well. Crime Writers of Canada as well. I longlisted with that first book, Abducted, and you don't get really much, if anything, as far as I remember, you don't get much of a long list because there's 10 people on the long list. So I longlisted with
There's 10 people on the long list
at the Crime Writers of Canada. Yeah.
Okay.
That's for the whole of Canada, you know, for
Okay. I mean, but I think it's pretty good if you get long listed.
Yeah,
And you're one of 10.
Yeah,
I'm impressed. I hear what you're saying, but because you're like, no, well, the short list is 5.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, but still, wow.
The thing with the short list is I got longlisted once with Abducted and 3 times with A Nice Place to Die. But finally I got shortlisted with A Nice Place to Die. And when you hit the short list, which is 5, you get critiques, you get feedback from all 3 or 4 or 5 judges. And that was very valuable, and the same with the Daphnes, you get really good feedback. And that's from professional writers and authors who are published, and that sort of thing can cost you many, many, many dollars, like to get that, to buy that. So that's, I don't know what I'm saying, but that, just trying to give you my impression of bits and pieces of information.
Well, it sounds like you were very methodical in how you went about getting published, which I'm very impressed by it, because as you said, there are authors out there that they just hit the jackpot as soon as they get out. And then there's others that definitely struggle. So always hearing this to me is good, because it gives people ideas of things that they can do if they're feeling maybe stuck or frustrated. Like, oh, well, hey, maybe I'll try to go the same route that Joyce did. Oh, I want to bring this up. You write, your name is Joyce Woollcott, but you write as J. Woollcott. Why did you choose to author that way?
Well, it wasn't because of the male-female thing at all, or anything to do with that. It's just that I just wanted the semblance of anonymity, and it actually isn't. I should have just written my name because everybody knows who I am. I just tried to keep it, I think we were briefly talking, and I said, like, writers in general are a little bit reclusive, and I'm just trying to keep a little bit of privacy. And I thought, well, then they won't even know who I am. Of course they know who I am. You just have to type in the name of the book. It's a picture of me and my husband, probably my dog, so it's like, I don't know. I just tried to give myself that little bit of a distance, but it doesn't work. So you know what? Call yourself whatever you like. If you want to be private, you just have to call yourself something different. And I had considered that, but apparently it's a nightmare if you don't know what you're doing, because then you got to get. I thought to myself, what if I'm ever at a convention and somebody calls me by, whatever, Bridget or something. And I go, what? Like, I don't know how it could be a different name.
Yeah.
And so it's just so confusing. I thought, well, I'll just keep it as simple as possible. And you know what? I was going to use my maiden name, which is Withers. And do you know, there's an author out there called Joyce Withers. I couldn't let him believe it. It's unbelievable. Like, who would have a name like that? And then I went, Elizabeth Withers. There's somebody out there like that too. Liz, you've got the best name. That's a cool name. It's short, to the point. Love it. That's Liz. She can't say anything back.
So you had just mentioned that writers are a bit, they try to be a bit reclusive, and that's why their bios tend to be very brief. And then here I am trying to get you guys, when I'm talking with you, tell me what I don't know. But that's why, is because when I am looking into authors to talk to on this program, as a reader, I can tell you, we are curious about you. And so here you are. Here's what I've learned. You went to art school and you studied majored in design, then you worked in broadcast journalism, and somewhere along the way, Jay Woollcott started writing police procedurals. So tell us about how you came to have that type of information in order to write a book.
Well, I always loved mysteries. And I think probably everybody here today loves mysteries. They could be cozies, they could be police procedurals, they could be thrillers. But to me, I love unraveling a mystery, a crime. And I'm not really too interested in a lot of blood and guts. That's not I don't really go for that so much. But I mean, I suppose my favorite would be someone like Vera or Shetland.
Mm-hmm.
Or I was watching the new Dalgleish, the PD James Dalgleish series.
Mm-hmm.
And really the PD James, there's another writer, I've actually written a couple of names down of writers. There's another writer that I don't know if people have ever read her, called Susan Hill. She's a British writer, and she writes the series on a detective and his family. He's the only detective in his family. They're all doctors, very well regarded doctors. But her writing is so beautiful and almost literary, and her stories can be a bit, she certainly doesn't pull back from blood and guts or anything. You wouldn't think it because of the settings and the way she writes, but she can be a little bit, over the edge. But there's her. And although funny enough, and I hate to say it, I've never been a big Agatha Christie fan. I know that's probably a dreadful thing to say, but I never really fancied Agatha. It's a little bit too, I don't know, over the top, But that's just me. But there's another one like, was it Denise Mina? Love her. Although I love her Garnet Hill series, where it was more like a mystery. She writes a lot of really cool literary stuff. And lately, The Bone Key, which is by Eliza Nellums. It's a really good mystery if you like Key West and historical poets, and just a really, really interesting, and a hurricane is about to hit Key West, and this lady is trying to protect this big historical house. And the other one, of course, The Lost Apothecary, Sarah Penner, which was, and The Dry,
Oh, The Dry.
The Dry was great because Jane Harper's a wonderful writer, and you get a real sense of Australia and the dryness and the drought and this, the landscape over there. But you also have this extraordinarily complex murder, but that you don't know who did it. And that's what I like. I like that unraveling of how did this happen? And why did that guy do that? Because you're presented with a mystery you're assuming is already solved, right? They tell you, well, he did it. He's been arrested. Obviously it was him, killed himself. And then that lovely, combined with the wonderful writing that Jane Harper has, that lovely unraveling of the different clues as to, well, yeah, but isn't that weird? And yeah, I know, but there's this. So that's the kind of thing I really enjoy, like books that are, that you don't have to wade through buckets of blood, to be entertained. You just enjoy the book. And I like books, even like sometimes Vera can be a little bit slow going, in that she's not one for car chases, and
well, she's
like
also, what I like about Vera is she's older, and she's not this, athlete.
Yeah.
And, and
the head. She does it. And do you not find that when you're I usually read in bed before I go to sleep. And so I don't read anything too scary, but I find with Vera and even Shetland, and Peter May writes a beautiful set of books, the Black House and things like that, set in the one of the islands up north in Scotland. It's really lovely writing, beautiful description. But I find, say with Vera, especially because it's a series, you get so involved in who they are that when you go and you open the book at the next chapter where you're reading, you're just going along on the story with these people that you know, and you're wondering what's going to happen next. And also when you get a character that you understand and you love and you know what they're going to do, sort of, isn't it great when, say, someone, let's say Vera, for example, when somebody who's really snotty and bossy comes up, or an aristocrat, and starts to push Vera around, you know that she's going to put them in their place. You know she's going to get the upper hand, you know, and you go, well, I can't wait to Vera puts him in his place, you know. So there is that comfort with a book that you enjoy, and you unravel a mystery, you know. I like that very much. I enjoy that. So I think that's why we all read mysteries.
Okay, so you had already mentioned that you wrote your first book, Abducted, and it was well received. Did that ever get published?
No, I mean, it's my, I think everybody has a book in a drawer. Not sure.
We hear that a lot.
I mean, actually, I was actually afraid that I haven't even looked at it for ages, and I noticed it was on my computer, and I read the first chapter, and I thought, that's not too bad, you know. although it's really funny because that book is clueless, right? Like that, and also the difference between Abducted and A Nice Place to Die, and the next one, which is actually finished now, Blood Relations. My two friends there are probably going, oh no, because I'll probably send them to Liz and Barron. But you know, you have benefit of a bit of learning, you know, you learned. But with Abducted, it literally was, I started at the beginning with an idea and I wrote it. And the funny thing was, I never really lost for, you know, the soggy middle or the saggy middle and all these different things, and you're supposed to do the writer's journey and all this here.
Yeah.
What about being blissfully ignorant and starting at the beginning and just writing the darn thing? And you know, I read the first chapter and I thought, well, that's not too bad, you know, like it could be worse. And I had started on chapter 3 and I was just reading away going, oh yeah. I mean, there are things that now in retrospect, there's obviously things, you know, all kinds of things that are wrong with it. But I mean, there's a book if you're bedridden and you've got no more ideas, and I could just sit in there and just fix it, I guess, a little bit. You know, it's readable. But the funny thing about Abducted is, and I don't even know, it's set in New York and Mexico. Now, and that's another thing where we jump to settings. Where the heck did that come from? Like, I mean, I've been to New York and I've been to Mexico. I've never lived there. It also partly takes place in Veracruz, and I've never been there. So a lot of that had to be done. A fair bit of it had to be done on Google, you know, fact checking and things like that. And I thought when I decided to write the Sergeant McBride series that, well, that's in a country I know and I live there, so I won't have to, you know, maybe even go over and update myself because it's been a while. But of course, then COVID hit, couldn't go. So I was Googling things because everything changes, you know, and they have to go into a bar. I have to go, what bar? I don't know what bars are in Belfast anymore. Then what bars are in Belfast, and go around and because the same thing with Abducted, I have set it in a market where a young boy is kidnapped. And it's a real market, a Bastos market outside Mexico City, Bastos. And the wonderful thing about Google is that I was able to go in to Google Earth and maps and everything and walk through the market and be in there and listen to the sounds and things. And that's an extraordinary gift for writers to be able to, if they can't get to the place, but again, you need to do that. You know, like research is so important because I think if I'm reading a book and the author has just sort of dropped it in, you know, oh yeah, I went to Paris, it was great. And then we went on somewhere else. You know, there's so much richness in these locations that you need to bring them in. Like, that's what I think that character that the setting is a character, and it should be a real part of your book. Like it should. One of the editors that I had, a British editor, I sent the book to originally, and I was talking to Liz about this actually. He was really interesting because he sent me back the manuscript, and he said, and I was all cross, you know, I'm like, what? But because it was one of the first ones that was quite in depth and everything. It was pretty good actually, but he wasn't bad actually. He wasn't too cruel, but he said you need to world build. You need to immerse your reader in the world that your character is in. So you just can't have them walking down the street and meeting a friend. Yes, you can. Reacher, for example, does that. You know. But Reacher in the Lead Child books, his structure and his focus is so different from a lot of mystery novels, because he is very much focused on plot and character of this big guy of Jack Reacher. And you get a little bit of description, but you can never say that Lead Child writes like Jane Harvey. You know, you can never say that atmosphere up in the northern US states and his landscape of him walking through cities is, and countryside is the same as what Jane Harper would write about Australia. It's just a part of the book that he gets through to get to the next shooting or the next mugging or the next, you know, what Reaper's like. So that's a whole different thing. I suppose some books, their strength is in either the central character, and you basically focus on that person and that person takes you through, or you have a wonderful plot storyline and you follow that. And then other books, I think, and to me, the more successful books combine a lot of this. So you have a wonderful character, you have a great story, and you have an extraordinary setting that you bring into that. And you also have good dialogue, you know, realistic dialogue, so that the characters live on the page, as opposed to just, you know, I think sometimes people tend to write what they think people will say without actually saying, well, would they say that? You know, would people really say that? But it's hard to do. And all of those things are things that I think that new writers need to learn in classes. It's very unusual that someone can just spring out of the box and never write a book and then suddenly be able to combine all these things, you know, setting, plot, story, you know, character, environment, and then actually have it be a book, you know, because some people are better at other things. And one person, I won't be naming any names, they're not here anyway, but a beautiful writer, just wonderful writer. But she tended to let the writing overtake the plot, so that you were losing the plot. I guess that's where that sentence came from, where we kept losing what's going on, because we're hearing all these words, but we're not moving through this, you know. And I think, and I'd said to her, like, from my own point of view, it's like a tree, you know, your plot is the main trunk of the tree, and your characters and your settings and your conversations and all of those things are the branches and the leaves that come out of it. But if you don't have a good, strong plot, you know, you really are losing a lot of readers. So you know, but she's done well. I mean, she actually has been, and she's a beautiful writer, so she's won now a couple of things, and I know she'll do well. It's once she discards a lot of the words for her plot, you know.
The fodder. I call it the fodder.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
When she's in love with words, and she's already written a book, a published book anyway. But as I say, it's really hard to get all these things to come together. And I think, and Liz will agree with me here, it's a journey that you have to take if you haven't come from a creative writing stream at a recognized, you know, Harvard or something. And I know you said earlier, Dawn, that there are these people who just, you know, come out and they've got a bestseller. I actually don't think I don't think that's sort of just luck. It's maybe a little bit of luck, because there's definitely some wonderful writers out there who don't get exposure and they don't become successful. Adrian McGinty, for example. But it's just luck, bad timing and luck with him, actually. That's an interesting story. But I think a lot of these people who come out and suddenly they've got a debut novel, it's not just suddenly, you know, they've studied it. This is what they've wanted to do. They have made contacts. They know how to present to agents. They get a good agent. From that good agent, they get feedback. They get help. Yes, this is working, this isn't. And then when they sell the book, they get to a good publisher who has good editors who they gives them more feedback. And I think that gives you a book that is a strong, wonderful book. And if I can just say, Nita Prose, who's just come out with a book called The Maid, which is a major Canadian success. Nita is actually, she's she's a senior editor at Random House, or one of the big publishers, and she's the senior editor in Toronto in Canada. And I actually talked with her and met her and actually queried her, but didn't end up getting taken on with her, but or with Random House. But she has a lot of experience, and she talked at one of the conventions that I went to, actually Liz went to, in downtown Toronto, and she was wonderful. And she understood the whole process of writing and querying and editing and what you need to have a good book. And it isn't surprising that she came out with a book like this. She's been on Good Morning America. I think it might have been Option now. I don't know. And this is her first book, and you say, oh, she just sprang out of nowhere. She got a
right.
No. She's worked very hard for that. So, you know, good for her. And Adrian McGinty, I saw him. He's a Northern Irish writer who writes a similar kind of thing. He writes the Sean Duffy detective series from Belfast, and nothing like mine. It's much more gritty and well written and all that nonsense. But you know, his characters are very much darker than mine, and he's an interesting character. And he went to he grew up in Northern Ireland in Carrickfergus, which is in one of my books actually. And then he went to Oxford and he studied philosophy and English and language, French. So he must be smart, I guess. But then he met a girl at Oxford. When they graduated, he followed her to the US, undocumented, and lived in New York as an illegal alien and working in bars. And he started to write his novels then, and they got married, and then I guess it's all okay. He started to write his Belfast novels, but Belfast was in the middle of such turmoil at that time that even though these novels were fabulous, nobody wanted to read about. It's like reading a novel about, you know, you're not interested, you know. So he basically gave up, and they moved to Australia, and they weren't making a lot of money, and he was driving a cab. And he emailed to one of his friends and said, you know what, I'm going to give up this writing game because it's not working for me. And his friend was so upset because McGinty's novels were so wonderful that he contacted his agent and sent him a book. And his agent read the book and contacted McGinty by phone in the middle of the night in Australia and said, I want to be your agent. And I want you to write another book, but not about Belfast. I want you to write a thriller. And McGinty said, no. I've given that up. That's not going to work for me. I'm not, obviously nobody likes it. And he said, oh, shut up. How about I give you, what was it? Does anyone know? $10,000? Here's $10,000 as a preview. Write the book. So McGinty said, okay. So he wrote The Chain, which after being worked on by this agent, it was auctioned, massive success, like literally bestseller. And then he wrote another one called The Island, and The Island is an even bigger success. And he, you know, he's like, now, so at that talk, I said to him, well, what about Sean Duffy? Like, what about your detective from Belfast? And he said, well, the thing is, he had not signed he had signed a contract and sold and given away all his rights because he didn't know what he was doing. So the publishers owned the Sean Duffy name forever. Bad move. And they wouldn't sell it back to him, or they wouldn't give it back to him. So we finally got a lawyer involved now that he had some money and an agent, and they managed to get it back. I'm sure they had to pay a lot of money, like hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they got the right. So he's written another Sean Duffy novel, and it's coming out. And he was interviewed by Stuart Neville, another Irish writer who had the same problem with writing about Belfast. But now things are turning around. Lucky for me. People seem to like Northern Ireland again.
Well, I was gonna say, I do want to talk about the fact that you chose to have, even though you're living in Canada, and I get it, you are born and bred Ireland, I get it, but yet you chose to have your setting in Belfast. Why Belfast and not Canada?
Well, I suppose, well, doesn't memory really play a part in rosying up things and landscape? And honestly, I live in fairly close to downtown Toronto, and it's a newish city. It's a lovely city. But as far as having a lot of character, and I know my other fellow Canadians will, won't hate me for this, it's not the most character-driven city. I mean, it has its own quirks, and but it's a new city, and with some older buildings. And to me, I would say that the setting is not exactly enough for me. It didn't speak to me the way I think back on my life growing up in Belfast and Northern Ireland, and going into the countryside and the ocean or the sea, and being near the water all the time, and rain. It's always raining. But there was just something about it. And there's also the people there are funny, I mean, we can't say that, bless us, that Canadians are hysterically funny. Some of them are, but in general, we're not like really humorous people, not like the Scots and the Irish, and I don't know, I guess there's other ones, but I find people from Northern Ireland hysterical, like they really are, and they don't mean to be. It's just the way it is. So I put humor into the books as well, because that's. I mean, I was over home a couple of years ago. My friend, who's just dead straight laced, she just said something like, "Where's my festering pen?" And I thought, festering pen, like that is the kind of thing, like a festering pen, and things like, "Is that grim?" or "It's mustard in here," means it's really hot. They have all these little expressions and things like, if you're looking for somebody, they're 2 doors down up the street, and back ahead. It's just all these different expressions that you just can't make that stuff up. And it's so, my cousins, for example, and one of the things we were on a cruise with my cousins, 2 of my cousins and their wives, and we were in hysterics the whole time, and they didn't even mean to be funny. We even had the waiters at the table on this cruise standing around listening to the stuff. They're just listening. And one of my cousins was a policeman, and it sounds like during the trouble, you think, oh my God, but everything was funny. Like, he actually was in an underground tunnel from the prison to a police station, that when they transferred high risk RA prisoners from one place to the other, whatever. And they were just as constables, they were escorting these guys, and they had guns and everything, and they're going along. He said, I was absolutely terrified. Really scared that anything would happen, because these guys were all like really scary guys. They're going, yeah, you wouldn't be so this, not, and if you didn't have a gun and all this here, and they're going, yes, you're right. I didn't have a gun. But they have the big rifles and everything. And he says, so they're walking along on this underground tunnel, and bang, the lights go out. It goes pitch black in the tunnel. And my cousin goes, oh my God, I was going to die. It was like, and you could hear everybody mumbling and everything. It was, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I mean, the prisoners were kind of had their handcuffs on and everything, but he said it was so frightening. And then the lights came back on again, and they're all going, ha, 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 and they walk on, they got them in. So it wasn't too life-threatening, but you know, things like that. It was quite funny. All kinds of stories. I have other stories of the troubles that, you know, we were down in Belfast and bombs, people getting grabbed for things and getting away. But it's just the funniness of it, and it's actually, Belfast is an interesting city. You know, it's gone through a lot, and there are, even the countryside is very lovely, and the small, you know, so it's a little bit more to me interesting, and I can remember a lot of it, even though I had to Google it too, you know.
So we are coming close to our hour, and for me it is absolutely flown by. So you gotta tell us about your book.
Oh yes, well, well, you know what? I just wrote a book I thought I would maybe like to write, and I think everybody kind of does that. I mean, you're never going to write a book you think, oh, I'd hate this, but I'm going to write it anyway. I'm going to write this book about aerodynamics and stuff. No. I just wrote a book. And I think it was the same as that first book that's in a drawer. I just got a little idea for something, and it just sort of spread out from there like a blood splatter. So it's just basically the life and time. Well, it's the life of a detective sergeant in the PSNI, which is the Police Service of Northern Ireland. So it's called A Nice Place to Die. And my sergeant, without giving any spoilers away, but
right, no spoilers.
They're already kind of out there anyway. He's pulled to a crime scene, and when he finds the body, goes down to check on the body, all the scenes of crime, people are all around, they're by a river in a forest park. He makes a discovery when he sees the body, and he looks at the body and he sees someone. Well, I might as well tell you, because really, well, I don't know. He knows the woman.
He knows the victim.
Yeah, and more than knows her, actually. So it's a bit of a shock to him. And because of this, he decides if he tells, he will probably lose the case. And he figures, being him, that he's a pretty damn good detective, and he wants to solve this crime. So he doesn't say anything about knowing her, and even goes to her apartment later and removes his card from her apartment so that no one will know. And then he proceeds to investigate her murder. And a couple of things happen just shortly after that shock him even more. But there's also a subplot in there about a date rapist who's going around in bars in Belfast and surrounding areas. And Ryan thinks it might be someone he knows is a rapist, and he's getting fixated on that. But they, and then he also has romantic entanglements with an ex-girlfriend who keeps coming back and forth, and her name is Bridget. And one of my other writing critiquers called her a trouble magnet. So I call that now, Bridget the trouble magnet. So she's a Harley riding emergency room nurse, and she's back and forth with Ryan all the time, you know, keeps dropping him and then picking him up again and things like that. So it all gets resolved in the end so that they can go on to book 2.
And I was going to ask you about book 2, because I believe you said you've written it.
Yes.
So it's ready to, I guess, I know it has to go through a process, but it's ready, right, to go through the publication process?
Well, not the public. It's due to go into the publishers in February, beginning of February. So before that, even though I did get it back from a developmental editor, at this point now, I will be sending it to critique partners that I have through Sisters in Crime, and they read the manuscripts. They read the manuscript, and then they get back to me with their thoughts on it, and then I make whatever changes I feel are appropriate or not, you know. And then when I get it back and it's ready, I'll send it to 2 other readers who may or may not be here today at this talk, because I feel it's more formatted then, and they are looking at the same genre, and get feedback from them, and then I get that back, and I look at whatever changes I need to do. At this point, because I do have a publisher, and it will go through the editing process, I won't send it out for line editing, which if you're going to be sending bits to agents, or just directly to some publishers, which will take direct submissions, you should probably get your work line edited. I know I should. I cringe because I'm comma challenged a little bit. Mostly, other than that, grammar wise, I'm reasonable, but I do have a little bit of an issue with commas, and because it's been so long since I learned about it, not saying anything about that. But yeah, I think if you're doing anything other than sending it to a publisher, a traditional publisher, you should get it line edited. Yeah, that's what I would suggest. So that's my process up to there, and then I'll send it in to them, and they'll go through it too.
And when are you expecting it to release next?
Well,
mid-next
hopefully
year?
it'll be released at the either end of August, beginning of September, because
So in about a year, yeah.
Yeah, a year between. I mean, we had a bit of a hiccup this year because our publisher had some health issues. Their senior president and senior editor was not well, and that caused a little bit of a backup, which they're trying to, I was about about 4 weeks late getting out, which isn't too bad since I got the contract almost 14 months earlier, so not bad. Publishing apparently is glacial. That's what my son-in-law.
And then beyond that, I think you had mentioned it, maybe not on this call, but previously in some of the information I was reading, that you signed a 2-book contract. So you've got your 2. What do you think? You're gonna maybe try to do a 3rd?
Well, I'll see. I mean, they wanted me to sign a 3-book, but to me it was too frightening. And I thought it's taken me 3 years or so, whatever, to write one. And I to write one in a year, it would be, I'd already started on book 2, so I knew I had that one in the hopper. And so I don't know. I have to think. I have some ideas for book 3. So it'd have to be a mutual thing between me and the publisher if they want to pick it up. But I also have a couple of other books that I'm interested. I've started writing a World War II romance mystery, and I've started another book of a detective type of thing set in Northern Ireland about a DCI on an island, so who retires early because of a situation, and then finds another mystery on this little island where he's gone to be alone. And again, that's that whole setting thing that I love to write about, the ocean or the water and the island and things like that. So yeah, that's on the thing, if I can ever get around to that,
Well, it sounds great, and it definitely sounds like you are on track to be one of those writers that we're going to see a lot of in the future. And I can tell you, I'm excited to read your books. I'm very interested in learning more about Ireland, so I'm excited about the setting being so prominent.
Yeah.
But I thank you very much for being here today. If anyone has any questions for Joyce, please unmute and let's get them out there, because like I said, we are coming up on our hour, so we're about to wrap up, but I don't want to dominate the conversation. So if anybody wants to pop on, please do. And if not, I'll just get into our closing, which is just going to make a couple of announcements. Next week is our Readers Rendezvous. This is a new program that we've started in Sisters in Crime Atlanta, and it's really just a roundtable fireside chat with fellow readers. And of course, writers are invited. But when you attend this, you're attending as a reader and not a writer. And we talk about books that you're reading and things that you're enjoying. And the topic that we decided we would talk about this next weekend is books to film. And so if you have a good, book that you read and it went to film, and whether you liked it or didn't like it, we want to know. This is just an opportunity for us to talk about what, as readers, what we think and feel with what we're getting exposed to. And I will, if you're interested, drop your email in the chat if I don't already have it, and I'll add you to the distribution list to get the link. And that's next Saturday, same time, 10 a.m. Eastern, which I think that's October 2nd. Also next weekend, for those of you that are local, we have the Decatur Book Festival. That's happening. I think it starts Friday and it runs through Sunday, and it's a really big deal. It's a great way to enjoy some nice weather and everything books that you can imagine at this festival. It's outdoors, and you literally just walk from table to table, tent to tent, and get exposed to more and more authors and books that are out there. And finally, in November, Sisters in Crime Atlanta is going to have a workshop on short story writing, and it is going to be available to everyone, and more information to come. And Charlie, I see you waving your hand. So how can we chat today?
I wanted to thank Joyce, and I come from a small town who has a sister city in Northern Ireland, Craigavon.
Oh, Craigavon, yeah.
And I got to meet several people from Craigavon, and heard lots of stories about being close to Belfast as well. And I'm glad you're writing in that area. I bought your book, so I'll find out how much I really recall from those conversations. But thank you for this.
And just so you know, well, maybe I'm wrong, but we call it Craigavon. What did you call it?
Craigavon. I get Craig out of it. So.
Oh, Craig. Yeah, we call it Craigavon, but it's always playing. Yeah. When I used to go to school, we went by this little town called Dough. And nobody who didn't know would ever know in a million years how to say that. Well, yeah, it's Doak.
Like duck?
No, Doak. And it's the tiniest town with two pubs. Two pubs. It's like,
well, two pubs. I think that the Irish language is it's hard to, like, I think of there's an actress, I don't know how to say it, Sharosa or something like that.
Siobhan?
No, I do know how to pronounce that because I taught myself.
Saoirse Ronan.
But if you read her name, it's not Saoirse.
No.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense.
So how do y'all learn the language? We sound things out in America, so.
We don't speak, like, I don't speak Gaelic language because, we're from Northern Ireland. Oh God, don't go there. But the fact of the matter is, whoops, there's weird again. The fact of the matter is that when you're actually, I always go back into more of a Belfast. I'm not on, are you hearing me? Can you hear me speaking? Oh, okay. I go into much more Belfast accent when we go home. And my husband can't follow. My husband and daughter going, what did you say? Like, because it's fast talking, and it's like, but that's what it is, with your friends, it's just like, and there's a really funny thing on Twitter where they have this radio interviewer. I don't know, I put it on my thing. Anyway, people from Northern Ireland are hysterically funny, and they don't mean to be, they just are just generally funny people. And I guess maybe the rain, I blame the rain for the troubles, actually. Nothing else to do.
The only thing was, I have a friend who's Welsh. Being from Wales, as the pronunciations is awful.
Oh yeah, Aberystwyth.
Oh.
I know that. Yeah,
my husband's Welsh. My daughter is in Wales. She speaks Welsh.
Oh, does she? She
Yeah.
speaks Welsh.
So
Well,
Marilyn, do
she's-
you speak it?
I actually, when, yeah, I did take Welsh,
Okay.
medieval Welsh. I was
Oh,
Oh my God.
yes, I was a medieval Celticist, shall we say.
Wow.
And actually, I had one article published.
That is very interesting.
But my husband is Welsh, and he always spoke Welsh to my daughter. My Welsh is not wonderful at all, and has really, now I don't
Yeah,
really,
forget it.
I can't remember. Yeah.
You don't
But I
use it.
used to read, get her, the little children's books from Wales, and I would read them to her and hope that I didn't murder the language too much.
I think that's wonderful. Liz, we are excited to see your book in the background. And Joyce was telling me about your novel, and I have every intention of reaching out to you probably in 2023 to see about getting you on the program. So I'm excited to talk with you more in the future.
Yes. I'm excited to read her book too.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for spending your Saturday morning with us. Joyce, it's been lovely. We're excited about your book, and we look forward to reading it and seeing more of you in the bookstores.
Thank
And
you.
you will all love her book, I can assure you.
I've
It's
heard great things
wonderful.
about it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Mhm. All right. Well, thank you. Happy Saturday. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Yes, thank
Thanks for
you.
hosting me. It was a great interview.
Glad to have you.
Bye.
Bye.